Ever get that feeling, um, like when the harder you search for something, the more it like slips away?
Yeah.
That's the kind of paradox we're going to be diving into today.
Oh, very cool.
So get ready to explore burnout.
Okay.
But not like, the typical way we think of burnout, like exhaustion and all that,
Right, right.
but almost like as a potential endpoint on a spiritual journey.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is not your typical self-improvement deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a collection of conversations between V and JK
Yeah.
and really exploring some radical ideas about what it means to seek
Yeah.
and what happens when that seeking sort of burns itself out.
I gotta admit, just the concept of burnout as a positive thing is already kind of throwing me for a loop.
Yeah.
The source materials seems to suggest that, maybe the very act of searching is what's preventing us from finding what we're looking for.
Right. And that's a key theme here.
Yeah.
JK actually, in these conversations, positions burnout as the ultimate goal.
Well, but he's not talking about collapsing in a heap of exhaustion.
Yeah.
He's talking about extinguishing the very flame of desire that drives the search in the first place.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, because I think for a lot of people, when they think of enlightenment or spiritual awakening,
Right.
they think of some, peak experience,
Mm-hmm.
a moment of profound realization.
Yeah.
But JK seems skeptical about those kinds of aha moments.
He is, and this is where it gets really, really interesting.
Okay.
He suggests that those sought-after moments of realization might be missing the point entirely.
Mm.
What if he asks what we're looking for is already the case?
Interesting.
Not in some future moment of enlightenment,
Yeah.
but right here, right now?
So instead of like climbing a mountain to reach some distant peak,
Right.
he's saying the peak is actually where we're standing already.
It's a radical shift in perspective,
Yeah.
and it challenges a lot of our assumptions about spiritual seeking. Yeah. So, for example, JK rejects the idea that there's some special inner space where thoughts reside.
Okay, so no like hidden cave of wisdom that we need to meditate our way into?
He doesn't see it that way.
Yeah.
For JK, thoughts are impersonal,
Okay.
almost like echoes of memories inherited from centuries of human experience.
Interesting.
They're not ours in any real sense.
That's a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
So if thoughts aren't tucked away in some private mental realm, then where are they?
Right. Yeah.
And what does that say about the whole idea of like observing your thoughts?
Right. Well, he points to the body,
Okay.
not just as a physical vessel,
Yeah?
but as a source of intelligence and sensitivity in its own right.
Wow.
In fact, he even suggests that the body is aware of itself,
Okay.
rather than there being a separate eye perceiving the body.
So instead of an eye trapped inside a body,
Right.
he's saying the body itself is part of the awareness.
Yeah,
That's pretty mind-bending.
it is.
What does that mean then for practices like mindfulness or meditation, where the aim is often to create that sense of a separate observer watching thoughts?
That's precisely the kind of approach that JK challenges.
Okay.
He's saying there is no separate observer to begin with, which raises the question,
Yeah.
what are we really trying to observe, and what
Mhm.
is that awareness that we're trying to cultivate?
It's like the rug's been pulled out from under everything we thought we knew about the spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no separate self to awaken,
Yeah.
no inner realm to explore,
Right.
then what are we left with?
Well, this is where JK introduces another radical concept.
Okay.
He says there's no such thing as experience in the conventional sense.
Okay.
What we call experience is actually perception colored by pre-existing knowledge
Okay.
and the illusion of a separate self.
So it's not just that our thoughts are shaped by conditioning, but our very perceptions are filtered through this lens of the self.
Exactly.
Wow.
He uses the example of looking at a camera stand.
Okay.
We might think we're simply seeing the object as it is, but JK points out that our perception is loaded with all sorts of pre-existing knowledge about camera stands,
Right.
what they're used for, and so on.
Yeah.
So even something as seemingly simple as seeing a camera stand
Right.
is actually an experience constructed by the mind,
Wow.
not a pure perception of reality.
That's wild.
Icky.
It makes you wonder then if even our basic perceptions are filtered through this lens of the self.
Yeah.
What would it even be like to see the world without that filter?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And JK doesn't offer any easy answers.
Right.
In fact, he suggests that the very act of searching for those answers might be part of the problem.
Okay, so we're not supposed to seek answers.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to meditate on our thoughts. We're not even supposed to trust our own perceptions.
Right.
It sounds like he's saying any attempt to change or improve ourselves is ultimately futile. Is that right?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
He sees this constant striving for something better, this relentless pursuit of enlightenment as coming from a place of craving and control.
And he links that craving for control to the illusion of a separate self.
Absolutely. It's like a feedback loop. The
It's not
more we
getting-
believe in a separate self that needs fixing, the more we seek ways to fix it.
Right.
And that seeking just reinforces the very illusion we're trying to break free from.
So even seeking nothingness or liberation is still coming from that place of wanting something different,
Yeah,
of not accepting what is.
exactly.
Hmm.
Which brings us to another one of JK's intriguing ideas.
Okay.
The idea that knowing itself can be an obstacle to true understanding.
So even the knowledge that we've been looking in the wrong direction is still a form of knowing.
Right.
That's a paradox for sure.
He is full of them.
Yeah.
He argues that even knowing something is not the case.
Okay.
For example, knowing that I have been searching for something that doesn't exist
Right.
is still a form of knowing.
Okay.
It's a mental construct, a thought, a concept.
Right.
It keeps us stuck in the realm of the mind, rather than allowing us to directly experience reality as it is.
So if knowledge and seeking are both traps,
Yeah.
where does that leave us? What's the alternative?
JK keeps circling back to a simple yet profound answer.
Okay.
He points to this, meaning the immediate present experience, as the only reality.
This as in, like, what's happening right now as we're having this conversation.
Exactly. Not this as a concept,
Yeah.
but this as a direct experience unmediated by thought.
But isn't everything an experience? Even
Yeah.
just sitting here listening, there's a sense of me experiencing it.
And that's precisely the illusion JK is trying to point us beyond. He's saying this isn't something you experience.
Okay.
It's what's experiencing. It's the ground of being the fundamental suchness of reality before we divide it up into subject and object, observer and observed.
Okay, I can feel my brain starting to knot up a bit here.
Yeah.
How do we even talk about this?
Yeah.
If it's beyond the grasp of language and thought.
It's definitely slippery territory.
Yeah.
JK himself acknowledges that words are ultimately inadequate,
Right.
but he does use a few terms that can help us get a sense of what he's pointing to.
Okay.
One of those is the scene.
The scene, like a movie scene.
Not quite. He uses the scene to describe the totality of experience,
Okay.
the whole shebang, without any sense of a separate observer. It's like a vast canvas on which everything is playing out,
Okay.
including the experience of a self.
Right.
But the scene itself isn't dependent on there being someone to witness it.
So all those things that we usually think of as essential, like consciousness awareness,
Right.
even a self,
Right.
they're all arising within this larger scene.
That's how JK sees it.
Wow.
He says the scene is always present, continuously unfolding, whether we're aware of it or not.
Mhm.
And it's in that constant unfolding, he suggests that the illusion of a separate you is revealed to be just that, an illusion.
It's like he's saying the real burnout isn't about stopping our thoughts or achieving some blissful state, but about realizing there's no one there to burn out in the first place.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
He's pointing to a radical shift in perspective,
Yeah.
a letting go of the whole seeker-seeking something paradigm.
Right.
And it can be a pretty disorienting experience.
I can imagine. It's like we're being asked to jump off a cliff and trust that there's no ground to hit.
He doesn't shy away from that feeling of free fall. In fact, he uses some pretty evocative language to describe it,
Okay.
talking about the taste of unearthly clarity and even reducing the entirety of life to a single word, touch.
Okay, now that's really intriguing.
Oh.
What exactly does he mean by touch in this context?
Yeah,
It doesn't sound like he's talking about physical touch.
you're right. He's not talking about the physical sensation.
Okay.
This touch is more like a fundamental quality of being,
Okay.
something that can't be defined or grasped by the mind,
Yeah.
but which is always present.
So it's like the underlying reality that's always there, even when we're caught up in our heads, lost in thought.
Exactly. And there's nothing you can do to make this touch happen.
It's not about striving or seeking, but about recognizing that it's already here, the ground of all experience.
This is so different from what we usually think of as spirituality, isn't it? It's almost like the path to enlightenment is to give up on the path altogether.
He's definitely challenging conventional spiritual paths.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the
Mhm.
hopelessness of the situation,
Okay.
but not in a depressing way.
Yeah.
It's more like a radical acceptance of the fact that we can't control reality,
Right.
that we can't force our way to enlightenment.
So instead of trying to get somewhere,
Right.
it's about recognizing that we're already there,
Yeah,
that everything we've been searching for is already present in this very moment.
that's it.
But doesn't that make us passive? If we give up on striving and seeking, don't we just become leaves blowing in the wind?
That's a common concern, and JK addresses it head on.
Okay.
It's not about passivity. It's about understanding that the doer, the one who's supposedly making choices and taking action, is yet another mental construct.
So there's no little me inside my head pulling the levers. He'd say it's another layer of the illusion. Think about it. Have you ever actually seen this doer?
Now that you mention it, no. I just sort of assume it's me doing things.
Exactly. And that assumption, JK would say, is precisely what obscures the reality of the scene. It's like trying to watch a movie while constantly thinking about the projector.
Right.
You miss the actual film.
Yeah.
The invitation is to step out of that projection booth of the mind and become absorbed in the movie that's already playing.
So how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we shift from identifying with the doer to simply being?
That's where the burnout comes in. Remember, JK is talking about a burnout of seeking a radical acceptance that there's nothing to achieve,
Yeah.
no separate self to improve. He uses the phrase choiceless awareness to describe the state of simply being present to whatever is arising,
Okay.
without judgment or the need to change it. But that doesn't mean we stop functioning in the world.
Right.
Actions still happen, choices are still made.
But if there's no doer, where do those actions come from?
He'd say they arise spontaneously from the scene itself. It's like a leaf floating down a river.
Okay.
Does the leaf need to try to float to make an effort to go with the current?
Okay. I see the analogy. The leaf is simply surrendering to the flow of the river without resistance.
Precisely. And JK would say that we are like that leaf carried by the current of the scene. Our actions still arise, but they come from a place of spontaneous responsiveness,
Okay.
rather than a calculated effort to control or manipulate outcomes.
It sounds incredibly liberating to consider that maybe all the striving and seeking I've been doing is actually what's been keeping me from experiencing the fullness of life as it is.
That's the heart of JK's message. He constantly reminds us that freedom isn't something we attain in the future.
Right.
It's available right now in this very moment if we simply allow ourselves to see it.
But this all seems so counterintuitive. We're constantly bombarded with messages about taking responsibility for our lives,
Right. Yeah.
making choices that lead to a better future.
He's not advocating for a reckless disregard of consequences.
Okay.
It's not about rejecting responsibility, but
Yeah.
seeing it in a new light.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our actions have an impact,
Yeah.
but that the sense of a separate self controlling those actions is part of the illusion.
So it's more about aligning with the flow of the scene rather than trying to force things to go our way.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from the scene.
Yeah.
We are the scene. And when that realization truly sinks in, it changes everything.
It's like the ground of being shifts beneath you.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're not trying to control the river. You are the river. But how do we even begin to make that shift? It all sounds so abstract.
JK uses a lot of metaphors to try to point us in the right direction.
Yeah.
He talks about how even a simple object like a chair can be a teacher.
A chair.
Yeah.
How can a chair teach us anything about enlightenment?
Think about it. The chair isn't demanding anything from us.
Right.
It's not asking us to observe it in a particular way or to have some special kind of awareness.
Right.
It just exists being itself as part of the scene. And in a way, that's what he's inviting us to do, to just be
Okay.
without all the mental commentary, the striving, the seeking.
To be like a chair. I'm not sure I'm ready to give up moving around just yet.
Right.
I get your point. We tend to bring so much mental baggage to every experience, even something as simple as sitting in a chair.
Exactly. And what JK is suggesting is that we can drop all that baggage.
Okay.
Forget the observer, forget consciousness, forget the search itself. Just be present, open, receptive to the scene as it unfolds.
So much easier said than done. But I can see how that kind of surrender, that burnout of seeking, could lead to a profound sense of peace.
He describes it as a state of choiceless awareness,
Okay.
a willingness to simply be with what is without judgment or the need to change it.
It reminds me of that saying, what you resist persists. The more we fight against the current of life, the more we suffer.
He'd likely agree. It's not about becoming passive, but about understanding that the sense of a separate self battling against reality is part of the illusion. When we let go of that illusion, we open ourselves to a deeper harmony,
Yeah.
a flowing with the current rather than a constant struggle against it.
This deep dive has certainly been a journey of its own. It's challenged my assumptions, opened up new perspectives, and left me feeling a sense of peace, I guess you could say. A peace that comes from realizing that maybe the answers I've been searching for weren't really answers at all, but simply the willingness to stop searching.
And that's the beauty of this kind of exploration. It's not about arriving at definitive conclusions.